Everybody, and welcome to today's Get in the Game panel. My name is Ailish Forfar. If you don't recognize me from my illustrious professional hockey career, I scored 1 goal. I will be hosting today's panel, and I'm very honored to be able to share this platform with these incredible athletes that we have lined up for you today. We have 6 panelists, so we're going to be splitting the event into 2 sections just so we can have a better conversation, and everybody knows it's hard to talk with 100 different people on Zoom. So we thank you for your patience. And just before we start, I want to remind you all that there's a Q&A button at the bottom. And if you have any questions for any of the athletes, or you want to chat or say where you're coming in from and where you're tuning in from, please do. And I will try to get your questions out to our athletes at the end of each panel. So if there's anything you're interested in, just don't ask Sarah Nurse about her stats compared to mine, please. It's embarrassing. So before we start, I want to say a special thank you to Canadian Tire Jumpstart Charities for their support on the Rally Report and with today's panel. So just before we begin and I introduce your athletes, I'd like to give you a little bit of context of why we're here, and what brought us all to today's conversation. So Canadian Women in Sport just released their Rally Report last week, and it surveyed over 10,000 Canadians to show the current state of female participation in sport. So some key findings that are going to drive our conversation today are that sport participation rates are not improving in Canada, with as many as 62% of Canadian girls not participating in sport whatsoever. So 1 in 3 girls are dropping out of sport compared to only 1 in 10 for boys. Factors such as ethnicity and disability have a significant role to play in low participation rates against girls, as well as income, access, and parental influence. Some positive findings are that when girls participate in sports, they participate in many sports, with over 80% of girls reporting that they're playing at least 2 sports, and over 30% playing in over 6. Girls identify many positive sport influences, such as physical health, fun, enjoyment, mental health and well-being, and confidence. So how can we inspire that next generation to get in the game and to stay in the game? So I'm going to introduce our first panel of athletes who are going to help us understand the power of sport for girls. Sarah Nurse from Hamilton, Ontario, a forward on Canada's national hockey team. She won a silver medal at the 2018 Winter Olympics and as a professional hockey player with the PWHPA. Rosie MacLennan from King City, Ontario, Canada's national trampoline team, a 2-time Olympic gold medalist and a 3-time world champion, along with many other accolades. And Marissa Papaconstantinou from Toronto, Ontario, a Paralympic sprinter who represented Team Canada at the 2016 Paralympic Games. Welcome. Come on in, girls. There they are.
Hi.
Hey, Marissa, how are you? Good. Rosie, coming in.
There we go. How's it going?
Hey, how are you? Good, thank you. We're waiting for Sarah. Hopefully. There she is. It's always that awkward moment when you're like logging in. Hey, Sarah. So great to see you all. I hope you're all staying, active and healthy throughout this time and getting a lot of Zoom FaceTimes, I'm sure. I'll start right away with our first kind of introduction. It would be, I would say, intimidating to be a young girl tuning into this Zoom to see the incredible lineup of athletes we have who have all, kind of represented Canada at the highest levels, whether it's the Olympics, the Paralympics, or playing your sport professionally. But if I'm a young girl just getting into the game right now, what else does sport have for me besides representing Canada? So, tell me about how it's taught you confidence, work ethic, leadership, and some of the things that are intangible besides, wearing Team Canada on your crest. So we can start with Rosie on that one.
Yeah, sure. Sport's incredibly valuable for many different things. I think for me personally, it's a space where I found my own voice. It's a space where I found my own confidence and built that confidence. In my sport, we literally fall on our face. So it taught me, anytime you fall, or face an obstacle, it just taught me to take a step back, analyze the situation and learn from that failure or obstacle. So resilience. But I think more than anything, it gave me a place where I felt like I could really be myself and connect with friends that I know will last a lifetime.
Sarah, maybe?
Yeah, I think that sport has been so important in my life. It's something that I've had since I was very young. And I think the biggest thing that it's probably provided me is that support system and the willingness, I guess, to reach out and ask for help. Constructive criticism, I know, has been a really big part of my career. Like, I'm so open and wanting honesty. Like, if I'm doing something wrong, I want to know about it so that I can correct it. So, I mean, that support system's just been huge. Playing hockey, obviously, it's a team sport. So I pretty much automatically have 15 really good friends wherever I go. And then obviously coaching staff, mentors. And so it's just been a great vehicle for connection.
Marissa, it's always tough to be the last one to answer, but anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I guess for me, like, growing up with a disability, it always created a space for me to believe that I can do anything I set my mind to. And I was really fortunate to be surrounded by so many other people, like-minded people in sport, that enabled me to feel that way. And so aside from, creating those friendships and like building on that, it just really made me believe that I can really do anything I set my mind to, no matter the obstacles that kind of come in my way.
And that kind of leads me into my next talking point is you've all had incredible, successful careers, especially at young ages, but it's not always been the highs, right? There are things you have to go through, such as setbacks, whether it's injury or defeat or, anxieties or lack of confidence. It doesn't matter if you're playing at the highest level or you're just starting, you are going to have those roadblocks. So what is it that allows you to get through those lows, and how does that teach you about yourself as a powerful female, not just as an athlete? How can you replicate that into whether it's in the classroom or whether it's in a professional realm? Who wants to answer?
Yeah, I guess it can be challenging sometimes. Like, it's really hard to see the value in the struggle when you're confronted with it or experiencing it in that moment. But for me, I think that's the importance of finding something that you're truly passionate about, and having open and honest conversations with your support system as well, when you are facing those challenges, and being able to differentiate between, this is something that I don't enjoy and I want to try something new, versus this is an obstacle, I'm uncomfortable, but deep down there's this desire, this passion, and this fuel that can get me through. So, I mean, whether it's injuries or, like, I know when I was young, the first time I tried out for a team, the provincial team in trampoline, I didn't get picked. And so initially it can be really disappointing, and that feeling of like not feeling like you're good enough, but you can either use those opportunities as a chance to learn and an opportunity to grow and kind of dig in and get to work, or you can let it defeat you. And I think it's a choice that you're always going to be confronted with, whether it's in sport or elsewhere. And in sport, it has taught me that, like, no, even if you do fail that first time or make that mistake the first time, like, the obstacles, like, that's actually when you learn the most and gain the most value out of the sporting experience. It's not standing on top of the podium. It is truly about learning how to take a step back, adapt, plan again, and learn and grow.
Marissa, you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, in the last couple of years, I've actually had like a lot of injuries and a lot of different obstacles I've kind of had to overcome. And I mean, again, it's like they're learning experiences, right? So each time you kind of overcome those obstacles, it gets you closer and closer to your final goal. And I think that's what keeps me going all the time, and what motivates me through all those tough times is that I have made goals for myself and I want to continue to work towards them. And at the end of the day, like, challenges, obstacles, like, they're a given, especially in sport. Like, they're going to happen regardless of, anything that's kind of happening. So I've really learned to kind of take the challenge. And I think it's really important to approach things in a neutral position. It's really hard to do that, but I've learned that it's good to approach things very neutrally and to kind of assess the situation and how to really progress from there.
I agree completely with what the both of them have said. I mean, I think of so many times that some of my highest moments have come out of some of my lowest. And that's something that's really important to understand, because I think that we grow so much when we fail. And I think sport like allows us to fail, and we get to learn from all of those experiences. What I try to do when, you know, I feel like things are tough or things aren't going well, like I really try to separate myself, as Marissa said, and really just think of it as like an outsider's perspective. Like if my best friend was going through what I was going through, what would I tell her? And, you know, 90% of the time, it's definitely not as harsh as what I'm sitting there telling myself in my own head. So I really try to separate myself and look at it from an outsider's point of view, because it's never as bad as you think it is.
And with the rally report, we saw a lot of, you know, feedback and information about girls that are dropping out of sport, and that may be because of a failure or of an injury. So what kind of encouragement can you have for teammates or young girls that, you know, hit a road bump and think, well, you know, I didn't make the team I wanted to make, or, you know, I got injured and it's too much to rehab back from that. What kind of positivity or inspiration can you give to someone that's watching that, you know, kind of lost that desire to keep fighting?
I would say definitely that, you know, ever since I was a little girl, my parents have always talked to me about like passion and love for what you do. And I think that if you're honestly truly passionate about something and you love it, there shouldn't be anything that kind of gets in your way to achieve what you want. And I think that, you know, when you do face those obstacles and things kind of don't go the way you had planned, at the end of the day, if it's something you love, then I think it's important that you keep that as part of your life, because there shouldn't be anybody or anything telling you that you can't do it, at the end of the day. So I think that passion and love for something is really important.
I think as we go back to like when we're kids and thinking about why we start getting into sports and why we start getting into activities, it's really about having fun, and it's because you enjoy what you're doing. I know for me, like I am not about one sport specialization. Like I think kids should play every sport possible. You know, it brings in different experiences, you get to meet different people. And so for me, like I played soccer until I was 18 years old, and it wasn't because I was going anywhere in soccer, it was because I just liked it and I had friends who played on the team and I enjoyed it. So I think it's really just examining yourself and getting back to your roots and doing what you enjoy doing. Like I wasn't the most amazing soccer player ever, but I just really liked it and I liked hanging out with my friends. So that's something that I did, and just really remembering that sports are fun and you can enjoy them.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what both Marissa and Sarah said. I think it is really about like connecting back to why you're doing it, but also I think when you have these goals that you set for yourself, whatever that next goal might be, it's really easy to get consumed by like how far you feel like you have to go to get there, rather than pausing, taking a step back and looking how far you've been able to come. And I think every time you face this an obstacle, it's almost like you're building a little like a toolbox in like what methods and what skills you can use the next time you come up against a challenge or an obstacle. So in the moment, as I said before, like it's really hard to kind of see the value in that challenge, and like the you just get kind of overwhelmed by the discomfort of it or the uncertainty of it. But there's always something you can focus on that can help you get better. And so if it's an injury, for example, it's like you can almost face it like a challenge and think about, yes, there's all these things that I'm limited from doing at this moment, but what are other aspects that will help me going forward that I wouldn't have necessarily focused on or wouldn't have necessarily prioritized in that moment. So like for me, when I was injured, it's a lot about like the mental training aspects, or even something outside of sport, and like finding some joy in spending time with friends or family. But yeah, it is, I think, first of all, like being able to connect to why you do the activity in the first place and keeping that joy front and center no matter what you're up against, and then always taking a step back and looking at how far you've come, not only just how far you need to go, and then just trying to see the opportunity to learn in that obstacle and challenge.
No, it's so inspirational to hear, you know, from especially you three athletes who have hit the pinnacle of your sport or are still achieving it, that it's not always going to be easy, and we're going to have to go through adversities and challenges, especially as female in sport. You know, I think it's pretty standard to say that there's a lot of inequalities that we face, whether we're females, whether we're, you know, athletes of color, athletes with disability. And I want to specifically ask Sarah a little bit about this because, you know, we're in the middle of a pivotal moment, I think, in society with injustices against the Black community kind of being at the forefront of our mind. And, you know, as an athlete of color, how can we help and be good allies, but B, help support and initiate change that needs to happen right now? And how important is it for you to have this platform to speak about this as an athlete who's faced, you know, these injustices?
I think it's so important to understand that we're going to make mistakes. Obviously, this is a delicate topic, something that's very uncomfortable for a lot of people to talk about, but it's just really understanding that, again, like, we're going to make mistakes and it's how we grow from it. I think as we kind of navigate this new world and really trying to make a change, education is so important. And I think education is important in all aspects of life. Like, even me on this panel right now, like, I'm learning things from Rosie, I'm learning things from Marissa as we speak. And so as we go through and we start talking about racial injustices, it's really educating yourself. There's so many resources out there. There's Google. There's so many series on Netflix and books to read. Just educating yourself and understanding the history. I think it's important that, you know, if you're not Black or brown or Indigenous, you're really not going to understand, but you can empathize. I think that all of us on this call, we're female athletes. We understand what it's like to not be treated equally, to not be treated fairly. So we can definitely empathize. And I think as a female sports community, like, we're historically pretty inclusive. I mean, like, we have a bunch of people from different races, religions, sexual orientations, identities. And so it's just being inclusive and really welcoming up that space so that people feel comfortable. And yeah, ultimately education is going to be really key moving forward.
And just to add on to that, you know, Marissa, as an athlete, as a Paralympian, you know, you can definitely talk on how we can make sport more accessible for everybody of all abilities, and where are we as a society falling short on that, and how can we help you use your platform here to talk about what you've, you know, dealt with as an athlete with a disability?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so I think I'm one of the lucky ones because growing up, I kind of mentioned this before, but I was always in an environment where I was always encouraged by my peers, and like that, whether that was at school or when I was in sport. And so I think that it's really important to create those environments for kids who face different challenges that are encouraging, because, you know, as a young girl, I never looked at myself thinking I couldn't do this because no one told me I couldn't. Everyone always told me I could. So I think that when you're at school or in those environments where, you know, you notice someone that might face different challenges, it's always important to encourage other people. I think today, in terms of like the Paralympic movement and everything that's been happening, there has been a really big shift. I think in the last like 8 years or so, there has been a lot more notoriety on the Paralympic Games for athletes with disabilities. Is it where it should be? Probably not, but there is a lot more. And I think, like, Ailish, you know, I'm in sport media at Ryerson, and like, part of my goal post-career and like in my professional career in the future is that I want to advocate for more media coverage so that it's more noticed in society and people understand it more and it becomes more normalized. So I think we're moving along in that trend, and it has improved a lot over the last few years. But yeah, going back to just like, it starts at the bottom and it starts with kids' participation. And I think that just creating those environments of encouragement really helps along the way.
It's so inspiring to hear you guys speak about it, because, you know, it's personal to you and you're passionate about it, and you're hoping to continue this past your playing careers into your professional careers. And I think covering sports is just as important as those people playing it, because if you can't, you know, turn on your television and see a woman of color speaking about sport, or a woman, you know, with a disability being able to address what's happening in the world, how are you able to see yourself in that platform? So I think it's important, as Marissa said, we're both in the sport media program at Ryerson. Actually, I just graduated, so you're in it alone now. But it's important to see, you know, coaches that represent you and players that represent you, and not just, you know, athletes that are going through the same thing. So I do want to add in some of these questions. We're getting millions of questions popping in, so I'm trying to read them and listen to you guys. But this one I think would be a really important one to address. It's from Amita. what is Sarah's, Marissa's, and Rosie's favorite mental training activities? And so how can, we've touched on a little bit of it about mental toughness, mental training. It's not just about being physically fit. We've all competed at high levels, and you know that your mind has to be just as strong as your body. So what are some tips for young girls or older girls that are getting into sport, how you can be mentally tough, and maybe some training or some books or anything you use to keep yourself mentally safe and fit while you're playing?
I guess I can start. Yeah, I mean, quarantine has really tested like my mental toughness throughout all of this because, I've really had to like continue to push myself in training, even though there's absolutely nothing on the horizon as of now, which can be like stressful and anxiety ridden because there's so many unknowns to the situation. Something I actually like recently learned is that coloring is very calming. I got this like really big coloring book, and it makes you very present. And I think often with my experience in the past, ways that my mental health and things that have made me anxious is thinking too far into the future and making myself anxious because of that. And so coloring is a really good way of actually bringing yourself into the moment and being really present, because you have to really focus on what you're doing. So that's actually been one way I've been coping with just like uncertain times and anxious feelings, and kind of like looking too far into the future but not really seeing what is there at this time. So that's one way that's been helping me a lot.
Something that I've done oftentimes, especially going into competitions where it feels like something's riding on it, like a qualification of some sort, and really any competition, I find that the anxiety that I get comes from like those unfinished thoughts, and like you can start like one thought and then it's unfinished and it spirals kind of, and it like you start thinking about all these different scenarios but you don't actually think them through. So one of the exercises that I've actually found really helpful is like first sitting down, writing out why I do the sport, what I love about it, and then I write down like all my support system, but then I actually take the time to like sit and think about like the best case scenario and what that would look like, and then I actually think about the worst case scenario and really give myself the chance to think it through, and what I would do. So like at an Olympic qualification, what if I fall flat on my face and don't get the chance to go on to the next round? Like how would I feel? What would I do? What would the next step be? And so I actually find that helpful, because then when my mind, like and I do this like a few months or a few weeks before the competition, so that when I'm training and I'm getting stressed out, or if it's something that it's not going as well as I'd want to, or like on the day of competition and my mind starts going to that scary space, I have this script that I can rely on. I know exactly what I'm going to do, not exactly how I'm going to feel, but I know that I'll have an emotional response, but like I know at the end of it, I will be okay, because I've already worked through it in a way. So for me, I find that incredibly helpful, because in a way, accepting and acknowledging like the uncertainty of it and like all the different potential outcomes, it gives me the freedom to like be unleashed and really like focus in on what the task at hand is, and be able to just focus on what I need to do in that moment.
Yeah, I think for me, we actually have a mental performance consultant, I believe that's her title, with Hockey Canada. And something that I've learned from her that's just really stuck with me is that you can view pretty much any scenario in life, whether that's sport or anything else, but you can view it as a challenge or a threat. And you can either see it as something like a challenge that you're going to be ready and go in and attack, or you can see it as a threat, something that is threatening to you that's going to attack you, and that has a negative connotation, whereas the challenge has more of a positive connotation. And I kind of see that as, I kind of try to see everything as a challenge, and that's just something that motivates me and something that really brings a lot of things into perspective for me. Like, is this really a threatening situation, or am I making it a threatening situation? And then something else that I'm like a firm believer in is like the law of attraction. You put positive vibes out in the world, positive things are coming back at you. You put negative things are gonna probably come back to you. I mean, like, we've all had those days where everything just goes wrong, and it's because you're focusing on that negative, instead of looking at, the positives that could be coming. So I have like a bunch of different journals that I use because I think that's super important. Like Rosie said, like the scripting, thinking about all of the possible outcomes, everything that could possibly happen. But also, I think it's just a really good outlet, writing down your thoughts and your feelings and getting everything out there so that you can work through it. Because once you work through things, a lot of things become a lot easier. So yeah, there are a ton of different things that you can do for your mental performance.
I think one other thing that I forgot, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Kind of building off what Sarah said too, is like taking a time each day to like find joy and gratitude, and especially in those really hard days, or when you're like facing an obstacle, but taking the time to like identify a few things each day that you're grateful for. And I think that kind of, again, like what Sarah was saying, like turns your thought process towards the positive and can give you that positive energy too.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. I actually do start my day with 5 things I'm grateful for. And like if you visually like see yourself after, there's like an instant smile that's on your face because it really just like puts things into perspective and automatically just like starts your day on a good note, regardless of like kind of what challenges you might have to face.
I'm going to get in a couple more questions here before we have to switch. Time flies, ladies. It's been such a good conversation already, so I want to make sure we get some of these audience questions in. This one was really interesting to me because I feel like we can all agree that a lot of times our coaches are male. And this question from Jonathan said, how can male coaches or dads provide confidence to our daughters and our players? So I'm trying to think, I think I've only ever had one female hockey coach in my career. And so obviously we're getting a lot of feedback and a lot of mentorship from males who may not understand exactly what females are going through. So what advice would you have for male coaches or dads when they're addressing their daughter or their team in sport?
I think really just listening and having open, honest conversation. I think you have to build that relationship up, and it has to be based on a huge amount of respect and a huge amount of trust. And I think that goes like whether it's a male coach or a female coach. I think that's just in general, coach athlete dynamic, and I guess parents too. I don't know, but I think if you listen to the athlete and vice versa, the athlete or the daughter has to listen the other way too. But building that trust so that you can have open, honest communication, and knowing that every piece of feedback is coming from a place of caring and love. I think that's a really important aspect, and figuring out how the athlete is motivated, how the young girl is motivated, what excites them, what gets them happy and brings them joy in the process of trying to challenge them to make progress and get better. But focusing on like development and improvement and things like that. But I don't know, now I'm just rambling. I'll let someone else talk now.
I think one thing that has actually happened to me, I've had a dad who coached his daughter, but he actually reached out to me and asked if I could like go back to when I was small, like how would I want to be coached, or what could I say to him to help him out. So I think just using people around you as resources. I mean, like if you have other females in your household, if you have like wives, whoever it is in the sports world, like talk to them about their experiences, what they would have thought when they were 8 years old, what they would have thought when they were 13 years old, because they've been through it. There's some things that my dad has said to me growing up as a girl playing sports that he didn't really understand, and he couldn't really comprehend because, you know, he's a male. He doesn't go through things that girls go through. He doesn't think like a female. And so I think really pulling from other people and their experiences is pretty helpful.
Marissa, before you answer this one, I'm going to give you a different question. Okay, so you're the youngest on the panel, so I got to call you out on this one. This is a question from Bronwyn. How do you deal with societal pressure in your teen years when sports become uncool to participate in? So we did notice throughout the rally reports that girls are dropping out, and it's within those pivotal days and those years. So what can we do when, you know, it's kind of uncool to be athletic? How can we push girls to stay motivated if maybe they're not on that elite path?
Yeah, I mean, I had a really interesting situation because I went to a sports high school called Bill Crothers in Markham. So everybody was pretty much a part of a sport there. But I mean, in general, like I obviously had friends outside of sports that weren't as involved or active as I was. And I think, again, it kind of just goes back to that fun and enjoyment of it. Like you always have to bring yourself back to like why you do something and why you enjoy it, regardless of what other people think. And I mean, I don't really see sports as being uncool, and I don't know who really does see sports as being uncool. So I think it really just comes back to like your enjoyment and like why you do it.
I think just to add to that, is just really having confidence. Like if you have a passion for a sport, it's important to convey that. I know that when I was in high school, a lot of my friends didn't understand what I was doing. So when I would leave for a week at a time to go to a national camp or something like that, they just didn't understand what I was doing. Like when I couldn't go to a party, they didn't understand that it was because I had a game that the next morning. And so I think it's really just being confident about sharing that with your friend group and the people that you're around, because I mean, you're playing a sport, you're proud to play that sport, and your friends are going to support you. And if they don't support you, they're not really your friends. You know, they're going to want to see you succeed.
You also build relationships and friendships within sport too. So I think relying heavily on the support of people within the sport world is important too, because that can help you build that confidence and courage to go back to your friends outside of sport who may not be having the same experiences, and sharing like what you do and why you do it, and trying to relate to them in that sense.
Well, I'm going to ask you all one more question. This one's from me. If you're watching this panel and you're a 10 or 12-year-old version of yourself, you know, what is that lasting kind of message you want before we have to switch to the next panel? But if you could tell your young self something, you know, motivational or passionate, or just in retrospect to where you are now, what would that be?
I would say to my young self to be unapologetically you. I feel like throughout my whole life, I've just approached everything as like, this is who I am. And if you have a problem with that, then I don't care. So I think that just really looking back and, you know, saying to younger girls or to my young self that if you really set your mind to something, you have all the will and all the power to achieve anything you want. And if anybody gets in your way or tells you otherwise, then they're not people you want to be around.
Yeah, I think my advice to young girls is chase the dream, love the journey. Like find something that you're incredibly passionate about and that you want to be doing and you love doing in an environment that you love, and set those goals really high. But I think ultimately it's not necessarily about the end point or the results that you get or the achievements that you get, but like the entire experience of sport. It's like the 99.9% of what you gain that's where the value of sport is. And it's the friendships that you build, the confidence that you build, the resilience that you learn, and the connections that you make. So I think it's being able to focus on that day in, day out enjoyment and experience of sport that's important.
For me, it's just bet on yourself and be your own biggest cheerleader, be your own biggest fan, because, you know, at the end of the day, when you're alone in your room, like you're alone with your own thoughts. And I think just having the confidence in your skills and abilities and really believing that you can do and you can achieve whatever you want to, but just really remembering that you need to be your own biggest fan and your own biggest cheerleader.
Well, I'm extremely motivated just speaking to you ladies, and I hope that all of the youth and parents and adults, and I've been reading the chat, and people are just so excited to be able to hear from your stories and to engage with you. So thank you for using this platform and sharing this with us. And I guess we're gonna have to boot you out and bring the next panel in. But I just want to say thank you, and it was a privilege to chat with you. And I hope you guys keep continuing to work hard this summer, and hopefully we can see you play in real life very soon. So thank you. Say bye to these three, everybody.